The legislature exercises its authority by convening meetings. It brings issues to the light of day. And what were you trying to bring to light of day regarding the constitutional amendments with your recent hearing?
Well, I think because of the response that we were getting from citizens throughout the state about what in fact is the duty of the Secretary of State when it comes to the constitutional amendment. Is he actively campaigning with taxpayer dollars on taxpayer time to try to overturn this amendment? And why is he not representing the state of Minnesota? On the other side, with the Attorney General, why is she not representing as our Attorney General the Secretary of State in these proceedings?
During the hearing, the DFL members said, well, he's exercising his authority as the Secretary of the State. He should weigh in on how he sees the impact of constitutional amendment on, if it was supported by the voters, what would happen. Do you agree with that?
Well, you know, there comes a point in time where, yes, you can weigh in, I believe, but it's how are you weighing in? Are you weighing in with information that is not even a credible source of information at this time? Because the constitutional amendment has not even been put to the voters yet. Once it's put to the voters, I think at that point in time our Secretary of State comes back with the next legislature if in fact it's passed. And if it is, then the legislature then at that time we'll make the decision on the photo IDs and how we move forward and how we administer. But to bring that up now, to me, is a moot point.
The issue we're talking about is a voter photo ID constitutional amendment. And Secretary of State Mark Ritchie, he ran as a DFL legislator. And DFL legislators in the Minnesota legislature and across the country largely do not support this initiative. Don't you think the public kind of expects him to act in this manner?
Well, I think the public kind of expects the governor to use a bully pulpit in his position when he's out and he does not like something. When it comes to a constitutional amendment, it's, I believe, up to the Secretary of State to educate the voters on the amendment and not try to look down the road before the amendment is passed. I think there's a fine line. There's a fine line when it comes to campaigning, which is one of the issues that we talked about in the committee under, I think it's Chapter 10A01, Subdivision 9. Is he using campaign expenditures to do what he's doing? And if so, has he violated the campaign laws by not having reporting? Is he using taxpayer dollars? These are the questions that the citizens want to know, and his refusal and the Attorney General's refusal to appear before our state government committee is totally unacceptable. And the citizens of the state believe it's unacceptable for them not to show up.
When he ran for public office, he ran as a DFL candidate. Why do we allow office holders who, based on your argument, should act in a nonpartisan manner, why do we allow them to run under a party label?
You know, that's a good question. If Jesse Ventura had his way, we wouldn't have to worry about that now, would we? But I don't know. Steve, to be honest with you, I think whether you're DFL or Republican, specifically in the case as the Secretary of State, I believe you have to move your agency forward in a very nonpartisan way. And that's what I think is concerning to the citizens that have come forward.
On the issue of the topics, there was a couple press conferences called by GLP members that questioned the Secretary of State's actions on establishing a topic title for these constitutional amendments. They said the legislature did that, and therefore he should not have done that. But do you think the titles that he chose dissuade voters from supporting those amendments?
Well, it creates a question, an uncertainty. It's not clear what his question really is. And so I think that does dissuade some voters. But I think the Supreme Court, I will be very disappointed if they come back and say a statute trumps the Constitution. And I don't believe they will do that. I think they will uphold our case. But most importantly, I think when you read into that, the legislature over and over and over again, specifically in the Senate when we were talking about this voter ID, photo ID. We specifically had a title, and that was in part all the debate was on the title and why. And so we set forward the intent. This is the way it should be, and we don't believe that Secretary Ritchie has a right to change that.
On a separate lawsuit brought forward by a few organizations, the issue was on the amendment. The amendment is longer with verbiage compared to the question that's put towards the voters. Specifically, the amendment talks about provisional ballots, it talks about government-issued photo IDs, but the question's much simpler. It says, all voters, including those not voting in person, must be subject to substantially equivalent identity and eligibility verification prior to a ballot being cast or counted. It doesn't talk about provisional ballots. It doesn't talk about government-issued photographic identification. Why didn't the legislature simply just put the amendment before the voters rather than rewrite the provisions of it into a question?
Well, I think we were looking at other cases around the United States that were moving forward at the same, and those that had won Supreme Court battles. And Senator Newman has been a champion in this, and you know, he would probably be better served to answer that full question, but I do know that was part of the background of that.
Do you believe, when it comes to constitutional amendments, and the legislature puts those forward on the ballot, the governor doesn't have the authority to stop the legislature from doing that, do you think that that process should require a supermajority vote by the legislature? In other words, that may force the issue to be more bipartisan in nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that's a very good question. We talked about it before we went on here today, and I guess there's one area that I'd probably have to agree with my colleague Senator Bach. I believe there needs to be good bipartisan. I'm for one, I get concerned if we really get into legislating by constitutional amendments, and I think a lot of the citizens are somewhat concerned about that. So, Steve, I guess I would have to agree with that.
What will your committee do in the coming months? I mean, this issue isn't over for you.
No, it's not. You know, I'm still concerned. I mean, we sent out specific questions. Here's some. Is the information Mr. Ritchie providing accurate and unbiased? How much has Mr. Ritchie billed taxpayers for his travels, his meals, his expenses? These aren't questions coming from Senator Mike Parry. These are questions coming from citizens. Citizens who have called and said, we have one taping on a radio talk show where an election judge called the show, and she was very upset that for the first 20 minutes of, and I believe this happened in Alexandria, for the first 20 minutes of their the Secretary of State's talk on the election judge, the training, was all against voter ID. How bad it was, what it was going to do, that it was going to cost millions and millions of dollars, that everybody's going to have to buy the electronics, they're going to have the internet. All of this information is coming back to us, and people are concerned about what's happening, what is right, what is not right. And so, you know, that comes to the other statute we've looked at, is 211B06, false political and campaign material. The penalty is a gross misdemeanor. If we, through this investigation, find information that would push us to file a complaint with OAH, that we will do. But we're gathering information. Right now we're waiting for the Supreme Court to do their job, oral arguments, but that really has nothing to do with what my committee is looking at right now.
An investigation, your committee is conducting an investigation currently. Is that
correct.
Accurate to say?
That's correct.
Well, Senator Parry, we'll keep monitoring your committee, and for future hearings, we'll make sure that we're there.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.